What y'all doing this morning? Huh? What are you doing over there? So, you got chickens. Now you're expecting eggs. What do you do with them once you get them? Let's talk about that. So, what do you do when you get those eggs? Well, sit back, relax, and I'm going to give you all the information that I've got. And while you're here, please like and subscribe. So before we jump right into the nesting boxes here, plan on collecting the eggs, we need to talk about where it starts. Your chickens. Okay, whether they're meat chickens or whether they're egg layers, they're both going to start out on starter feed. Starter feed has about 20% protein, and that's what they need to develop and grow. When they get between 8 weeks to 18 weeks, what they're going to need is grower feed. That's going to drop their protein percentage down from 20% down to about 17%. Well, 17 to 18%, according to what kind of feed you get. But that still has enough protein in it where they still developing their muscles, kind of building them up, getting them stronger, and that's perfectly fine. When they get 18 weeks, what you're going to buy, your layers, is called layer feed. The layer feed has about 16% protein, and it drops that protein down even a little more, where if it's broiler chickens or meat chickens, they'll continue to feed them a higher protein percentage because they want to bulking up and getting bigger. And since they're going to cull those chickens, much earlier than what you will your laying chickens, the process of feeding them a lot of protein really doesn't matter. But if you're feeding a lot of protein to your egg layers, because you're going to have them much longer, then the problem you're going to run into is that high level of protein can cause organ damage, and it can actually decrease the lifespan of your hen. So you want to stay away from higher percentage proteins in your egg layers. Now, your nesting boxes, or what they're going to lay their eggs in. There's a lot of people who do it a lot of different ways. I'll just give you the general formula, and you can figure it out from there on what works for you. Doesn't have to be pretty, doesn't have to be perfect. Trust me, the chickens don't mind anyway. But I'll give you the information on it anyway. My nesting boxes are like, we've got 4 nesting boxes. They are what the recommended size for nesting boxes are. They're 16 by 16 by 16. We fill them with hay. Now, these nesting boxes can be filled with hay, straw, any kind of soft bedding. Some people will actually use wood chips for their bedding, but the chickens don't seem to like the wood chips as much. One other thing a lot of people mention about nesting boxes, and that is where you put your nesting box. Now, this part doesn't really matter, but I promise you it's going to matter to you in the end. Doesn't really matter to the chickens, but it will to you, and that's where it's located. Now, my nesting boxes, they're accessible from the outside, so I don't even have to go inside the chicken coop. The chickens come in the nesting boxes from out the coop, lay their eggs, and go do their business. The lid here is normally closed. When I come inside of the house in the morning to collect the eggs, I don't have to go in where the chickens are. All I gotta do is come over, open my lid up, latch it, hey chicken, and collect my eggs. I collect my eggs. Watch out, chicken! Watch out, chicken! I collect my eggs, put them up, head inside. So, when you get them inside, what do you do with them? Take them straight to the sink and start washing them? Absolutely not. It's not a good idea. That bloom that's on these eggs is a protective coating that those chickens put on there. Once you take that bloom off, it's much more susceptible to getting odors in it, getting bacteria in it, anything. So you really don't want to wash those eggs until you're ready to use them. The other thing is, when you put eggs into the fridge, because these shells actually are porous. So if you put it in the fridge and there's something stinky in that porous or something that's real odorous, these eggs have the tendency to absorb those smells. And so I would keep the eggs away from anything inside your fridge that may have kind of a stinky smell. Okay, once I get my eggs inside, the first thing I want to do is inspect my eggs. Just want to look at them, and the first thing is you just want to make sure they're not dirty. Now, if they've been out, if they laid them out in the run or something, that's one thing. But if they're in a clean layer box, then what you need to make sure of is if these things are dirty, it probably indicates that your chickens have worms. So the chickens need to be dewormed. There's two primary ways to do that. First way is, so you got worms? I don't. Chickens don't. Diatomaceous earth. Works great. Works every time. The second way is, okay, one of the ways to treat your chickens, if you think they have worms, is of course apple cider vinegar. Which I put this one out. This is a batch I've got going now. It's still got another 2 weeks before it'll be ready, but you're going to treat them with apple cider vinegar. You're going to take 4 teaspoons, put it in a gallon of water, and you're going to put it in their water. That way, that'll make their intestinal tract a little more acidic, and it'll make it inhospitable for those worms, and it'll get rid of the worms. So, I was going to make a whole video about this particular thing, but it's really not that complicated, not really enough to make a whole video about. But during the spring and the fall, I'll make a batch of pine needle apple cider vinegar. It's a little stronger, and believe it or not, it really helps deworm chickens. So what I'll do is I'll make a batch of apple cider vinegar, and I'll take the pine needles. Of course, I'll take it off of the stalk, and I'll take the tip ends and cut those off, and just take the needles and put them inside of the apple cider vinegar. I'll let it sit for about 6 weeks, and once it sits, it'll draw all it needs to out of the pine needles, and it's ready to go. And I'll mix it the same as I do the regular apple cider vinegar. So believe it or not, also there's an art to how you actually store the eggs. When you're storing the eggs, you want to make sure you put the blunt end up. The blunt end goes up. Yes, it does, not the pointy end. Reason being that there's a air sac at the top that when you store it, it kind of keeps the yolk centered, and it keeps the air pocket from rupturing and thus spoiling the egg. Who knew? Now, whether you actually end up storing your eggs on the counter, or you could store them in the fridge. That's completely up to you. I understand that there are, well, most of the European countries, they don't refrigerate their eggs at all. Matter of fact, they sell them in the stores unrefrigerated. That's kind of an American thing. But I do know if you store them in the fridge, they're going to last longer. So, me personally, I store the eggs in the fridge. If you want to store them on the counter, fine, well and good. That's completely up to you. So, as far as where I store my eggs in the fridge, I generally try to keep them away from anything that has a real strong odor, because eggs are known to absorb odors because of the fact those eggshells are still porous. But as long as you don't wash those eggs and that bloom stays intact, that'll combat that some. Oh, by the way, quick fact. Did you happen to know that a lot of the egg companies that produce the eggs for all the major stores and stuff, they have between 30 and 60 days to actually get their eggs to the store. They call them farm fresh. So, one of the most important things you can do to check your eggs to make sure they're okay is the good old float test. Take your egg, put it in some water. If it sinks to the bottom, your egg's good. If it starts to rise about halfway up, probably not. But if it's floating, it's definitely bad. Get rid of it. Well, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe while you're here. It does help. And I guess I better get started eating these eggs. We're running out of room.